Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alphabetical Fugazi, the only podcast that devotes an episode each to discussing every song in the band's catalog, from Fuga A to Fuga Z. I'm your host, Ian James Wright, and joining me today to discuss Burning 2 from the 1989 Margin Walker EP is Paul Warham, a Fugazi fan just like you. Hey, Paul, how's it going?
Hey, Ian, thank you so much for having me. Your previous guests have been just incredible, so to be a part of that really means everything to me.
Well, I'm very glad you could participate. So, Paul, I wanted to ask you first of all about your relationship with Fugazi on the whole. Do you want to start off at the beginning where you first heard them and how you got into them?
Well, it would probably begin all the way back in Boy Scouts. My friend Nick Tembro and I, when we were in fifth grade, met an older Boy Scout named Tim Marcellus. And this is 1989-ish. He had like the Tony Hawk hair with the bangs and the limpy pajama pants that skaters used to wear at that time. And every Thursday night after our Boy Scout meetings, Tim would practice in the parking lot with his no-nosed tail-only skateboard. And we would watch him and we were hooked, you know. I mean, we saw skateboarding on TV and all that, but to see it in front of us and with such a cool older dude, you know, we were just like, whoa, what is this? And eventually Tim took us under his wing, not as an older scout showing us knots, but as an older scout saying, hey, check this out. This is Public Enemy. And Nick and I are still friends to this day. And at that time in 89, we were just obsessed with skateboarding and music. That quote by Ian MacKaye about skateboarding, right? I have it written down here. It's, skateboarding is not a hobby, it's a sport. Skateboarding is a way of learning how to redefine the world around you, and a way of getting out of the house, connecting with other people, and looking at the world through different eyes.
I have heard that quote before. Yeah, what's that from?
It must have been an interview, but I know I read it somewhere once. So when I was doing research for this guest interview here, I looked up Ian MacKaye skateboard quote, and that's what I found. And it just feels so right, you know. I mean, even at the age of 43 right now, I'll walk around the neighborhood and be like, oh yeah, Ollie 180 off that curb and 360 kickflip over that manhole, you know, and just walking around it. I just see the world in a different way.
That's really cool. I knew that, you know, skateboarding was so huge to Ian MacKaye early on. That's a dimension of that I could never personally relate to with him. I never got into skateboarding myself. I did own a Ninja Turtles skateboard when I was a kid. It was like terrible. I probably tried to learn to skateboard, but maybe I could partially blame the skateboard itself for me not ever learning. But I think I always wanted to be a skater. I sort of wore airwalks and Vans and the trapping of like the skater lifestyle. So I admired you guys, but I was never a participant really.
I also love that skateboarders can be artists a lot of the time because they are looking through that different lens. You know, as an art teacher, I love when skateboarders do their own graphics. It's a different way of thinking, like Ian said, and I love that. So Nick and I started getting deeper and deeper in the late 80s, early 90s with music. We are obsessed with Public Enemy, and we still have a debate to this day what album is better, Fear of a Black Planet or It Takes a Nation of Millions? And It Takes a Nation of Millions is the correct answer on that one, I think. So this guy, Nick, that I keep mentioning, his name is Nick Tamburo, and he played drums for Cassiotone for the Painfully Alone. Are you familiar? And the Dead Science, which was with Jarek Bischoff and Sam Mickens. And then they played with Daniel Johnston as their backup band, maybe in Seattle. I think it was Seattle where they were backing up for him. And also, which is really great, he transcribed number 34 of the 33 and a third series, the Nirvana's in Utero, by Gillian G. Garr. So, and we've been friends forever. So I called him the other day. I was like, do you know your name is like is like related to Nirvana? Because that's just incredible to me. He's like, oh yeah, I always forget that. And I said, how do you forget something like that?
What do you mean by he transcribed it?
Well, he either edited it or the author had it like in like ideas in a tape recorder, and he typed it out. You know
Oh,
what I
I see.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that the right
Yeah, I guess
word?
so. Yeah, if
Right?
somebody's like
Okay.
dictating and then somebody transcribes the whole thing. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So by ninth grade, freshman year of high school, I have a cousin who is a senior, and some of her friends, Jeff Blehar and Trisha Combs, were like amongst like the seniors. They started making mixtapes for for me and my friend Nick and my cousin Matt. And on those mixtapes were Black Flag and Husker Du, Minor Threat, Pixies, Sebadoh. And, that was the style at the time, is making mixtapes. And I still have them to this day, actually. And you will like this part. They're all in alphabetical order by last name. So,
Hey, there you go.
but there's some
Mixtapes are such a great
sentimental.
artifacts from
Yeah,
that
they're relics
era.
of my life, for sure.
And it's
Um,
not it's a lost art form. And
yes.
it's one that I just yeah, I remember so viscerally creating mixtapes and how that worked, trying to get
Yeah.
stuff off the radio, time it just right, hope the DJ wouldn't talk too long over the intro. Yeah.
Oh, I remember the first time I did that, my younger brother and I, we put up a Fisher-Price tape recorder next to our alarm clock and got Amadeus by Falco. Remember that? Amadeus,
Nice.
Amadeus. That
Yeah.
was our first time we hit record. But yeah, those mixtapes were like a portal into a whole universe of energy and messages, and which isn't unlike skateboarding. Like skateboarding is a whole universe of like, whoa, what is this? And it's a little rough. It's a little like an outcast thing, and not everyone's into it. So I feel like that it went hand in hand at the time. But so as high school went on, around 10th grade, my friend Jeff came home from Cortland College, and we would do one of our Syracuse trips, because I'm from Oneida, New York, which is between Utica and Syracuse. And we only had one car in the family, so my friends would schlep me around everywhere. So we would go into Utica to go record store shopping, and Syracuse to go record shopping. But we went to the Fayetteville Mall, and that no longer exists. There's a new mall there now, of course, and it was a record store in there. And it wasn't the Last Unicorn, which is a big central New York record shop, but it could have been Record World. And at the end of an aisle was featuring In on the Kill Taker. And I looked over at Jeff and I was like, whoa, what is this? And he told me, oh, that's Ian from Minor Threat's new band. So I bought it, I threw it in my Discman, and for the whole summer, as I'm mowing lawns for $4 an hour, I just listened to it over and over and over. And especially, when you're in 10th grade, Smallpox Champion and Great Cop are like,
Oh
it
yeah.
scratches your ear in that perfect way. But because of those mixtapes that Jeff made me, like with Husker Du on them or the Pixies, it made me really appreciate like those slower songs. It doesn't always have to be a mosh pit. You know what I mean? It's like those slower songs of Last Chance for a Slow Dance or Rend It. I learned to really appreciate those for sure.
Absolutely. It sounds like good lawn mowing music to me.
Yeah, just over and over again. And then, of course, I went back and I discovered like their previous albums, of course, too. Oh, in fact, in 10th grade, 11th grade, I painted a picture of the band photo that's in the liner notes of In on the Kill Taker. Are you familiar with it? It's a little greenish, it's a little yellowish,
Yeah.
it's dark. That painting that I painted was horrible, by the way. So if I could find that painting, it would be awesome just to see how just juvenile and incredibly horrible that picture is. No brush techniques, no proper placement of facial features, just trying my
And speaking of
so
which, you mentioned you were
yeah.
an art teacher, and you had mentioned to me that Fugazi sort of plays into what you do, right?
Well, recently I posted a remote learning lesson of photography, because in the classroom, there can be upwards to 30 kids. If I gave a disposable camera or some sort of cell phone with a camera on it to 30 kids, it would just be unruly. Just the management wouldn't really be ideal. So I thought, hey, the parents are home. They could guide their child into learning about photography, not just selfies, but really think about colors and whatnot. So what I did was like all my lessons, if the standard calls for scissor techniques or blending colors, I find an artist that will represent that. Like scissor techniques could be Matisse, and blending colors could be like Seurat with his pointillism. So I introduced Bernice Abbott, New York photographer, Ouija for his photojournalism, and then I thought, hey, I'm going to do just, give a piece of myself, give a piece of my own hobbies and interests. I'm going to do Glenn Friedman. And I got a really good response. A lot of parents said, here's a picture of them scootering down the sidewalk or cars passing the house, and they would capture that motion of like Glenn's skateboarding pictures of the 70s and early 80s, or his live photos of the Bad Brains. But I like doing that with students to give them something a little more contemporary and a piece of myself too.
That's awesome. Shout out to Glenn Friedman, by the way. He has a book for listeners who don't know, which is called Keep Your Eyes Open, the Fugazi photographs of Glenn E. Friedman. I own that. It's a great coffee table book to have around if you're a fan of the band. So check
definitely.
that out.
It was released on September 3rd, 2007, 20 years after their first show, Fugazi's first show.
That's great trivia. That's the kind of trivia that I bring to this podcast. I like
it. So I took notes. I wanted to, as a teacher, am I cheating on the final exam here?
Absolutely not. Come prepared.
Okay. But after I say that I do have notes in front of me, it's all research of lyrics and names and dates of record releases. It's not, I didn't go on like genius.com and see what other people have to say about Burning 2. I definitely, this is authentically my opinion. So
okay, well, let's jump into it then. We're talking about Burning 2. I do have a couple of introductory remarks, which, well, this is a statistic that you might not have from your research. Let's just see. As you may know if you've been listening to the show, I've done some like data analysis of the Fugazi live series, which, basically I have this sort of spreadsheet of all the that represents all the songs and all the concerts played there, which is like apparently some Fugazi shows are missing from that archive, but I think it's the most complete data set that we have. And the thing that shocked me, I was looking it up. I was trying to find out which songs were played most frequently, and the song "Burning" and the song "Burning 2" were both played the same number of times live. Which I was like, I can't believe it. Is this correct? So I double checked it. It looks like it. Yeah, both played 212 times live, according to the research that I've done, at least.
And Burning is the fourth song on side A, the last song on side A, and Burning 2 is the third song, last song on side A of Margin Walker.
Aha.
So both last songs of side A as well.
And I also thought I'd say, before we jump into really talking about the song, in our last episode on Burning, we discussed some other notable songs about burning or fire, and I thought, just to kick things off, I would say my other top 10 most notable songs about burning or fire that we didn't mention to get those out of the way. Here we go. Number 1, Burning Down the House by Talking Heads.
Woo!
Number 2, Beds Are Burning by Midnight Oil.
Yes.
We've got number 3, I'm on Fire by Springsteen, which I like. Very understated little one. We've got Play with Fire by the Rolling Stones. You 90s kids might remember Fire, Water, Burn by the Bloodhound Gang.
Oh my goodness.
We've got Ring of Fire by Johnny Cash. Burn the Witch by Radiohead. Fire and Rain by James Taylor. Bring it back to some punk rock with Forest Fire by the Dead Kennedys. And, of course, we've got the song simply entitled Burn from the Hamilton soundtrack. So there you go.
I love that you mentioned James Taylor. That's my mom's favorite. Like 100. James Taylor is my mom's Fugazi for sure.
So Burning 2, then, what's the first thing that you'd like to say about this song? Where should we start here?
Well, I think one thing that hits me so much is that, you just did the last song that I heard you from the podcast was Birthday Pony.
Okay.
And I learned so much from that through that perspective. But for Burning 2, like it was totally different than what I thought or interpreted, which is fine. Everyone interprets them on their own, in their own way. But I think that Burning Two's lyrics are not up for interpretation at all.
It's a little more straightforward, which can be
right.
Sometimes I'm thankful for that on this podcast, because occasionally you get a song that's like, what on earth is this about?
Yeah, what I also liked about Birthday Pony is your discussion of like how you thought it was so different than your guests as well, and that's just something that's special too. But Brendan's drumming throughout this whole song is almost vocal, in my opinion. He's almost like the third voice, because of course Guy's vocals are throughout it, and Ian's, of course. But I feel like Brendan's drumming, it's like the punctuation, So it starts off with a single instrument, and if I could go back to the Pixies just to make the full circle of Pixies references.
There's
Pixies...
one that I forgot. The Pixies had a song called "Dig for Fire." I didn't mention that one.
Mark it down.
Damn it. Okay. Top 11 songs. All right, go ahead.
Nice, good one. So a lot of Pixie songs started with a single instrument. The Burning 2 starts with guitars. I wonder how many more Fugazi songs do start with a single instrument,
Yeah, it seems like that's a trick that they did pretty often, is just starting it off with a single instrument, and then gradually the band comes in one by one.
Yeah, and then Brennan's drums come in like this firework popping off, He's like, hey, wake up, hey.
Oh, they explode in like a machine gun. It's amazing.
Yeah. And then even at the end of the song, just to continue with talking with the drumming, where it's like, do it now, do it. And then you can almost hear the drums or the cymbals. That's the last you hear, like, do it. And then it just fades, as if like, now it's your responsibility. We just put this song in your lap. Are you going to be active and help the environment, or stop just sitting there and making up excuses? Like, actually go out and do something.
Speaking of drums, I mean, I think this song is a great example of what a good rhythm guitarist Ian is also, because I guess in this song it's just Ian playing guitar, right? There's no Guy. So it's, and sometimes, Guy is a great guitarist, but sometimes if he's not on the track, it's easier to focus on what Ian is doing and just admire, because it's just sort of him, Joe, and Brendan locking in, and it's this just great rhythm that forms the verses of the song.
Groove.
Yeah, it's a real funky groove.
The harmonizing between Guy and Ian, to like a trained musician might not be pleasant to their ears, but to me, who, I'm not a musician at all, it's just awesome. Like the monotone, like Ian saying, anytime but now, and then Guy's going, anytime but now, just right over it. It just sounds, it sounds like Fugazi to me. It sounds perfect, of course, and I'm sure it was done on purpose. Intentional.
I was thinking the same thing. It's not something that they really did a lot, as much as they have like vocal interplay, Ian and Guy. That's sort of harmonizing almost. Yeah, you're right. It's not like bang on sort of Beach Boys harmonizing, but maybe more. It's more so like that in this song than anything else they've done. Yeah, I would have to think about that, but I don't think it's very common for them to do it exactly like that in the catalog.
Right. And they talk about time, obviously, right there, right on the first line there. And then, of course, Waiting Room talks about time running down a drain. And then your episode number 6, was it, with Aaron Nelson?
Mm-hmm.
With Badmouth, time is now, it's running out. I wonder, again, here's a question for the listeners, but out of 13 songs, how many more speak of time? And I wonder if that was a theme that was also intentional.
Yeah, it seems like it's so interesting because Ian was such a young guy at the time, but it seems like a topic that was really top of mind for him was that he just sort of felt the pressure of time running out and him having a limited amount of time to do all the stuff that he really wanted to do in life.
In his early 20s.
Yeah,
time is running out.
I hope he looks back and is satisfied with how he used his time, because
of course,
it certainly seems like he accomplished a lot to me.
But but also that anytime but now, anywhere but here, anyone but me. It's, with that monotone and then Guy's voice, Ian and Guy's together. It's almost like a subconscious ghostly whisper saying like, anytime but now, like these are your inner thoughts. And then it's just Ian's voice saying, I got to think about my own life. And it's repeated for a second time too, but it's almost like these inner thoughts are these demons or ghosts that are saying like, no, not now, not me. This has nothing to do with me. And then you say out loud, I got to think about my own life, you know?
It's like somebody having an argument with himself, you mean?
Yeah. How did you interpret it?
Yeah, I don't think I thought about it from that angle, but that's very interesting that you'd say that. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was just mainly focused on those first four lines. I mean, yeah, do you feel as attacked by this song as I do?
Of course. It's like, they're demanding, do it now. Like, what the fuck are you doing? Go out there.
Probably anyone who cares about the environment feels like that, and everyone is supposed to feel like that. That's kind of the point of the song. But I do like that, but it's hard to listen to the song without feeling like, man, what am I doing to help, right? And
right. Which is a good self-reflection. It makes you really consider what have you done for your community. It's a pro like active song. You have to get up and be active, and yeah.
Yeah, and in the larger context, of course, this song definitely seems like it's mostly about the climate. But just those first four lines on their own, you can apply that to any kind of, political, social activism.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I'd say when I think about this song, or when I'm not even consciously thinking about it, but those lines, that's just what pops into my head. Singing a little jingle to myself as I do some chore. I'll sing those four lines of this song. So in that way, they certainly succeeded in getting that subconsciously into their listeners' minds, or at least it worked for me.
Yeah, like a chant. It's like a chant, that maybe people who aren't as active, or the apathy chant, anytime but now, anywhere but here, anyone but me,
Yeah.
Why does this have to happen now? Which really speaks to presently, like contemporary, what's happening. It's you spoke with Chris Richards about our argument, how that almost was like a prediction of the wars that did not need to happen. And I almost think like this is a prediction too. Like, who was talking about global warming in '88? And sure, there was Greenpeace and things like that, but not as like a daily conversation. This is almost like before the time where talking about climate change was really, in a daily conversation.
Yeah, so I was looking this up. So a couple of interesting things that happened around that time is the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, was created in 1988 by the United Nations Environment Program and the World Meteorological Organization. And to this day, like that's the body. It continues to release extremely alarming reports about climate change. So that happened about that time. Also, I was looking up some stuff about Al Gore, who he's the first one who held a congressional hearing on climate change, which happened in 1976. But also, he wrote a notable editorial in the Washington Post in May of 1989, which is the month before the Margin Walker EP was released, where he said he argued that the climate change and the fate of the Earth, in a larger sense, is the number one national security issue, which is something that he always continued to. And so I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about the argument when it comes to that, and just meditating on, man, I think Al Gore losing to George W. Bush 20 years ago might be one of the worst things that's happened in modern history.
Yeah.
Because think about right now, as we speak in the middle of 2020, it's, the COVID-19 epidemic is happening. The George Floyd related protests are in high gear around the country. It's never felt like we've been farther from solving the climate crisis right now, right? Like, so much other terrible stuff is happening that, man, our eye is really off the ball about this huge issue. Not that the other issues aren't important.
No,
but,
of course not.
Man.
No, but would they be as strong issues as they are if he, was in the White House? He was elected, but if he was in the White House.
Yeah, and of course that relates to the argument too, because if he were in the White House, probably we wouldn't have plunged into the Iraq War and killed hundreds of thousands of people.
The Patriot Act. I mean, the list goes on. It's so funny how that's just for me, like being so old, 43 or whatever, like I think of the year 2000 as like, oh, that was just like 5 years ago, but so much has happened. And a lot of it is like these laws where you're like, well, how could we ever turn around the Patriot Act? How could we like abolish it and like maybe not have the TSA when you go to the airport be all over you and just violate so many laws and just it's just I'm not into it at all. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
That might just for me, it might be the turning point of modern history. At least,
agreed.
At least
just
from my
negative from there on.
solipsistic point of view, for my own life, like that was the first election that I voted in, and so on. So it's.
I voted for Ralph Nader during that one.
Oh,
I don't know
did?
if I'm part of the problem. Damn you!
It's all your fault, Paul.
It is, yeah. So where were we? I wanted to. We got to put it out, got to put it out. This Guy, and then the sky is burning. Ian comes in, right, and they repeat that a few times. It again going back to Public Enemy. It reminds me of like Guy at his top Flavor Flav form, where I hear that influence throughout the song. And it's not call and response. It's more just two vocals going back and forth. Ian with the message, and then Guy as like the relief. Just. Ian's very, very straight laced, and then Guy comes off with these voices or whatever. And do you agree with that? Like he does, Guy does do the voices like from time to time. He slides in and out of the French accent or even the language. He'll put some words in. He rolls his R's.
I do agree, and also somebody else who agrees. I solicited some comments from social media for this episode. A listener named Terrence Warburton says for him it's a favorite from the early period, no doubt. Probably the best example of Guy as the hype man, in my opinion.
Yes!
So there you go. You and Terrence
All
on
right,
the same
Terrence.
page.
Yes. Good. That's awesome.
We also, let's see, we have Ryan Christopher Egolf, who says, what a call to action. Definitely one of the earlier songs that put its hooks into me. I'd never claimed to be great at unpacking lyrics, but these seem wonderfully upfront and deliver a powerful message. Love the back and forth vocals. And Brendan and Joe locking in so solid. Perfect. So, yeah, there you go. We've got a lot of agreement there. So the line, we are obsessed with variety, as something... I wish I could put my finger on it, where I was listening to somebody talking about that recently, how American consumerism is... it is definitely that, and the question of whether it really makes us happy, right? There are a lot of countries where, for example, you almost ever only see one kind of car.
Yes.
And that's in America we have a lot more choice. But does that really make it like if the difference between getting a Toyota and buying a Nissan, like is it?
Right. What color do you want the sunroof? How many airbags do you want? Do you want the CD changer? So in 2004, there was a book called The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, How the Culture of Abundance Robs Us of Satisfaction. And that's by Barry Schwartz, The Paradox of Choice. And he talks about that, how, we talk about anxiety and depression so much more now. And this song's from 1988, where, Ian says, we are all filled with anxiety. Well, who was saying how they felt, in 1988? It was almost like a sign of weakness, like, oh, I'm depressed, or whatever, where now anxiety is like an everyday word. Again, going back to the prediction of they're just so far ahead of their time when it comes to social issues, I think.
I wanted to mention this. So the song was released on the 1989 Margin Walker EP, but you're right, it is from 1988. It looks like, according to my resources here, the first time they played it was August 1st, 1988, at DC Space.
Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
There you go.
I think I just shouted out 1988, not realizing if it was 88 or 89.
You are correct. It was written way back then, apparently. And speaking of the obsessed with variety line, Fugazi is sort of a demonstration of going against that, just simply in that they always played the same instruments, right? They're not one of these bands that would have a new guitar for every song like you see sometimes. They would just have one instrument, play it through the entire set. Yeah, they would have, I guess, probably a backup guitar just in case there was an equipment malfunction. But yeah, they just not only through the entire sets, but through most of their career. Like there, I guess a couple of times you see them switching from one to another. I guess sometimes Joe played a jazz bass instead of a stingray.
So I was going to ask you about "World Would Not Survive," and for some reason I'm looking at the lyrics and I was like, "World would not survive," like the use of the word "would," you know, and why isn't it the world will not survive? You know, if you keep consuming without consequence, the world will not survive. Why is it world would not survive? I wonder why would was the choice. How did you interpret that? Or did you think of it at all?
I just sort of assumed it's like maybe not purposeful, and it's a slight grammatical inaccuracy, to be honest. I guess
Oh, okay.
would that be the subjunctive mood, like the just the possibility that the world would not survive, rather than the more certain verb of will not survive?
Yeah. Huh.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think I would say that anxiety that this world will not survive, but yeah, I guess would implies more of that it's a possibility.
It, like you said, it is a lecture song. They are lecturing us like, hey, wake up, get out there, get moving, and the song makes you move. It's definitely hard to sit still, like I said before. It's a mover.
Another line I wanted to point out, speaking of lecture, the world is not our facility. We have a responsibility, etc. That's interesting in that, so in the political conversation around taking action on climate change, this is another place where the ever helpful Christian right has sort of inserted their 2 cents, and there's an argument against that from like a traditional Christian reading of the Bible. I think this may be the first time in the podcast that I'm going to quote from the Bible, but here we go.
Yes.
In Genesis 1:28, and God blessed them, and God said to them, talking about Adam and Eve, I'm sure, God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So there is an argument that has been made from a Christian point of view that, in fact, the world is our facility, and we have dominion over it. Yeah, we can subdue it. We can do whatever we want to it. It's here to serve us and cater to our needs. So this song is standing sort of directly opposite to that particular interpretation of the Bible.
Right. Which, we're talking about interpretations of the Bible too. Is there, I've heard of one like where they talk about like not eating meat in some verse of the Bible too, so it's interesting how you can interpret the Bible different ways, and people have, and it's dangerous, of course, to an extent. And we're interpreting the lyrics of Fugazi too, to our own, and people can say like, I saw Fugazi and it was a spiritual,
Yeah, this is our Bible, man.
I'm so happy you said that. I didn't want to come off as like the fanatic fan that's bananas, but yeah, as someone who, you need guidance in your life. I mean, I have wonderful parents and incredible friends and a wonderful partner for 10 years. And we, I mean, every once in a while, like if you hear like someone that you look up to so much with these wonderful values and this wonderful way of just being kind to everyone and the earth and looking at things that are oppressive and calling them out through an artistic art form. When you asked me to rate this song, I have it. I'm all good to go with that. But I almost thought like, there's I don't know if you're into rap music or whatever, because I was bringing up Public Enemy, but there's a new album out by Run the Jewels, and
yes, I got it on day one. Yeah.
Oh, me too. When it came out on Wednesday instead of Friday as a surprise, I thought, I don't usually go to Pitchfork, unless it's for a band that I absolutely like am loving, because how, like with a band like that, where it's not just music, Fugazi is not just music. It's a philosophy. It's an education. How do you rate an education? How do you rate philosophy or a way of life even? It is a way of life. And people live their life by the Bible, and I don't live my life by Fugazi, but we have a common goal. We have, and to hear the music of Fugazi is like giving me fresh batteries to go on throughout my day, being a kind person and helpful to people, And going back to Boy Scouts, the whole Boy Scout law: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind.
Well, if you're ready to rate things, let me throw in one more thing before we go there,
Yeah.
which is to step away from the climate change, global warming interpretation for a second. The one thing that this song always reminds me of is, so there's an author named Sherwood Anderson. He is one of the maybe sort of authors from the early 20th century who's faded a little bit into history, and he's not now as well known as your Ernest Hemingways, etc. But he was really influential among authors and among in modernist literature. So he wrote this novel called Winesburg, Ohio. That's sort of a I don't know if it's properly called a novel, or maybe it's a collection of short stories that all intertwine with each other in this town. But the story from that collection that always stuck with me is called A Man of Ideas. It's just sort of about this interesting, eccentric character, Joe Welling, and I thought I'd read a relevant excerpt here, which is just sort of to illustrate the kind of person he was. He's like, he accosts this reporter from a newspaper, and it says, Joe Welling crowded the young reporter against the front of the feed store. He appeared to be lost in thought, rolling his eyes about and running a thin, nervous hand through his hair. A smile spread over his face, and his gold teeth glittered. You get out your notebook, he commanded. You carry a little pad of paper in your pocket, don't you? I knew you did. Well, you set this down. I thought of it the other day. Let's take decay. Now, what is decay? It's fire. It burns up wood and other things. You never thought of that? Of course not. This sidewalk here, and this feed store, the trees down the street there, they're all on fire. They're burning up. Decay, you see, is always going on. It doesn't stop. Water and paint can't stop it. If a thing is iron, then what? It rusts, you see. That's fire, too. The world is on fire. Start your pieces in the paper that way. Just say in big letters, the world is on fire. That will make them look up.
Wow.
End quote. It's
wow.
I read that in college at some point, and for these 20 years later, it's still with me. That I was just amazed by that quote. So that's another way to think of this song, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. How it's everything's burning and it's decaying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just another way to look at things.
Absolutely.
Well, with that said, let's talk ratings.
Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me?
This is always the hard part, and for all of your guests that you've had. So I initially did 3.5, but I really thought about this. Like, of course, this is important to me. The lyrics are just so spot on. They're not heavy with interpretation or poetry. It's more, it's just like you said, like a lecture, like straight on, like do this. In fact, the song at the end says, do it now. But it's, the music it moves people. And that's what the lyrics want you to do, is move. And so I'm bringing it up from a 3.5 to a 4, just for the message, of course. Yeah.
I'm more vacillating myself between like a 3.5 and a 3, just because Fugazi has so many great songs. I think this might be a little more down the middle in my book. I guess one thing that I forgot to say about the music that I think is interesting is, in the verses it has this sort of bouncy, funky, I think you called it, major key feel. And then there's sort of a dramatic shift to the chorus where it's all of a sudden it sounds like maybe a minor tonality. I didn't really work out on the guitar what they're doing, but it sounds, definitely more of a minor key, menacing kind of tonality to it, and it's unexpected. It doesn't sound like the chorus is going to go there. So that is a nice little aspect of it. So given that part, Ian's excellent rhythm guitar work, the parts of the song that sort of stick in your head and rattle around and remind you and prod you on to try to at least think about what you're doing to make change in the world. I'll do a little bump and I'll say 3.5 for me. It sounds like we're in a similar range, I think, on this one.
Right. Yeah, they all can't be 5, right? I mean, they could, but...
Speaking of which, what would you say, what's a 5-star Fugazi song for you?
So my, I didn't finish my story about like high school and stuff. It just was going to go on and on about like how Fugazi was in my life and this and that and the shows that I've seen and whatnot throughout like college and stuff. But for my high school yearbook quote, I quoted "Shut the door. I broke the surface so I could breathe. I closed my eyes so I could see." So that was my senior quote. From Shut the Door. And it's always been a favorite of mine. And I'm not necessarily into jam bands at all, but like you said in a previous episode of yours, they do jam out on that song. As you see for the first song of the instrument soundtrack or the instrument documentary film, that is just so electrifying when they're going back and forth with the guitar, like not just the guitars, but the whole band just, You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, they have this whole rhythm
wonderful.
with each other. It's like an organism. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great one.
Yeah.
Let's talk plugs. If you have any, where can listeners reach you? Do you have any sort of projects that you're working on that you want people to check out? Anything like that?
Well, since remote learning is still up in the air for September, I'm not doing anything with art at the moment, but we're just trying to figure out like what school is going to look like in a few months. So that's really what's been on my plate is how I'm going to adjust from there. And it looks like it's a possibility. We're just not going to be teaching art or things like that until this clears. We're going to just help out classroom teachers with smaller groups of kids. But it changes all the time. So, but usually my art medium is poetry or pottery. And like collaging, mixed media, if I wanted to be cooler and say mixed media sounds better, but collaging mostly like cut and paste. I love doing things like that. But I don't have a Facebook. I have an Instagram, and you can reach me at P Warham. It's just PWARHAM if you want to talk or check out the many posts I have throughout my Instagram account of Fugazi memorabilia, like posters, or I have and a couple of the early lyric sheets that they would pass out during their first few shows.
Oh, wow.
They would pass out lyric sheets to their audience, and that's like one of my prized possessions of Fugazi things that I own. But I do have to find that crazy portrait of them that I did in 11th grade, which just looks probably horrible. I can't wait to find that. That's going to be great.
I did have a look at your Instagram, but I think I didn't see that lyric sheet one, so I'm going to have to go back in and look harder.
Okay, yeah,
I'll tag
you. I'll tag you in that for sure so you can see
it. Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Well, great. And as for me, as always, you can reach me at fugaziA2Z@gmail.com, and you can join the Facebook group, The Alphabetical Fugazi, and tell us what you think about today's song. I hope you'll join me for the next episode when we will be discussing By You. Until then, keep your eyes open.
This is my life.